Napoleon is one of the most famous historical figures in the world. And yet, many people know little about him other than that he was a short-statured Frenchman who once crowned himself emperor and then died after a long exile on an island. But there's much more to the story. In today's video, we'll reveal 13 secrets they hid from you about Napoleon. Number 13, he wasn't short. History books have done Napoleon no favor. Not only is he misremembered as short when he actually wasn't, but his legacy is also typically presented as one of a tyrannical conqueror whose ambition knew no bounds. While there is some truth to this characterization, it doesn't tell the whole story of the French icon. For one, despite popular belief, Napoleon wasn't necessarily short. He was mismeasured during the French Revolution while wearing a cocked hat and misidentified as being under 4 feet 11 inches. However, a 2020 study by a team of French and American physicians concluded that he was likely closer to 5 feet, 6 inches, or 168 centimeters, putting him right around modern-day NBA point guard Dennis Smith-Jeyer's height. To put Napoleon's height into perspective, the average French male in the late 18th century stood at around 5 feet, 3 inches, or 160 centimeters, just a tad shorter than our guy. No, 12, his royal lineage. Despite the fact that he came from humble beginnings and made his way up through the ranks of the French military, Napoleon is actually related to some of Europe's most notable royalty. Through his mother, he was a first cousin twice removed of King Louis XVI of France and Marie Antoinette. And through his father, he was a distant relative of King Charles VI. If you were to go back far enough, Napoleon is related to almost all of Europe's royal families. This makes his rise from general to emperor all the more remarkable given that he was a member of the lower Corsican nobility. 11. The American connection. Long before he became the infamous leader of France, Napoleon studied in the United States. At age 9, he enrolled in a prestigious military school in Brienne, France. And 2 years later, he transferred to another famous academy in Paris called the Military College of Paris. It was here where he developed his interest in America and its leaders like George Washington, whom he would later refer to as Le Chef or the Boss. Napoleon went on to study engineering in the hopes of returning to America and serving under General Washington during the Revolutionary War. Unfortunately for Napoleon and the Americans, he was turned down because he was too young to join the military. He did, however, write to Thomas Jefferson in 1785, asking for advice on how to become an engineer in the United States Army. When Jefferson found out that Napoleon was a Corsican, he advised him to return to France and help bring about liberty there instead. 10. He was a child genius. Although Napoleon didn't get his wish to fight in the American Revolutionary War, he made the most of his situation and applied his natural aptitude for engineering to artillery. By age 16, he had published his first book, a treatise on the military uses of artillery. During his time in France, he continued to study hard, graduating top of his class in artillery and graduating second in his class in engineering. These impressive credentials allowed him to secure a commission in the French artillery and begin his military career. Given his brilliance as a student, it's not surprising that he rose through the ranks quickly. 9. Marriage of convenience. Napoleon met Josephine de Beauharnais in 1795 and married her 2 years later. She was a beautiful former actress with a noble title, making her an ideal match for the rising general. Most importantly, the marriage gave Napoleon access to her social circle, which helped to further his political ambitions. Unfortunately for Napoleon, his wife had no intention of being faithful. She had an affair soon after the wedding and continued to cheat throughout their relationship. But Napoleon was too ambitious to let this bother him. 8. His rise to power. After the French Revolution, France was in chaos. There was no strong central government and the country was being torn apart by civil war. Enter Napoleon, who seized power in a coup d'etat at the age of just 34 and installed himself as the first consul of France. While this was technically still a republic, Napoleon held so much power that he might as well have been a king. Over the next few years, he stabilized the country, ending the revolution and establishing a strong central government. He also launched a series of successful military campaigns that expanded French territory and established him as a national hero. All of this led to Napoleon crowning himself emperor in 1804. Number 7. The Napoleonic Code. One of Napoleon's most lasting legacies is the Napoleonic Code, a comprehensive set of laws that he implemented throughout his empire. The code was based on Enlightenment principles and is considered a major step forward for human rights. Some of its most notable features include the abolition of feudalism, the introduction of due process, and the guarantee of religious freedom. The Napoleonic Code had a profound impact on the legal systems of many countries and is still in force in some places today. Number 6. His empire. Although Napoleon is often remembered as a failed emperor, his empire was actually quite successful. He ruled over a vast territory that encompassed much of Europe, and his armies were victorious in most of their major engagements. Furthermore, Napoleon's empire was relatively stable, with most of his subjects being relatively happy under his rule. Of course, things eventually fell apart, but this was largely due to Napoleon's own hubris. He ultimately lost his empire due to his decision to invade Russia. No, 5. The Russian campaign. Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812 is one of the most famous military blunders in history. His army of over 40,000 men entered Russia in June and quickly began to suffer from supply shortages. As they advanced further into the country, the weather turned cold and many of Napoleon's troops were not prepared for the harsh conditions. By the time Napoleon reached Moscow, only a fraction of his army remained. He was forced to retreat, and most of his remaining troops were killed or captured. The disastrous campaign led to the decline of Napoleon's empire and ultimately his downfall. Number 4. Exile. After his defeat in Russia, Napoleon was forced to abdicate the throne and was exiled to the island of Elba off the coast of Italy. Here he lived in luxury, having an entire palace to himself and a small fortune to spend as he pleased. He was allowed to keep his title of emperor and even had the freedom to travel around Europe. However, Napoleon was never truly happy in exile. He longed to return to France and reclaim his power. And when the opportunity presented itself, he took it. In 1815, he escaped Elba and returned to France. This led to the famous 100 Days' War, which ended with Napoleon's final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. No, 3. St. Helena. After his defeat at Waterloo, Napoleon was exiled again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean. He spent his final years here in relative obscurity, writing his memoirs and meeting with visitors from around the world. Napoleon died in 1821 at the age of 51. The exact cause of his death is unknown, but it is believed to have been caused by stomach cancer. No. 2. Legacy. Despite his many accomplishments, Napoleon's legacy is often a negative one. He is typically remembered as a ruthless conqueror and tyrant. However, this view of Napoleon is largely inaccurate. While it is true that he was a brilliant military strategist and ruthless when necessary, he was also a reformer and a champion of human rights. Furthermore, most of his conquests were actually defensive, as he was constantly trying to protect France from invasion. Ultimately, Napoleon's legacy is a complex one. He was a brilliant military strategist and a gifted administrator who accomplished many great things for France. However, he was also a flawed human being who made terrible decisions that led to the deaths of millions. Number 1. Short and fat. Napoleon was neither short nor fat, but the propaganda machine of his enemies painted him that way anyway. The image of a short and fat Napoleon has persisted throughout history, despite the fact that it is completely false. So why did his enemies bother spreading these rumors? Well, it's simple. They wanted to make Napoleon look ridiculous. By portraying him as a short and fat tyrant, his opponents hoped to make him seem like a cartoon character rather than a serious leader. This worked to some extent, as many people still believe these false rumors to this day. However, it didn't stop Napoleon from accomplishing great things. In the end, it is his accomplishments that have cemented his place in history. Thanks for watching. Now check out 13 insane facts about ancient Rome you never knew, or click this other video instead.